Alright, welcome everyone to another episode of our playthrough of Pokemon Emerald. So today we're going to be heading back towards the 5th gym leader, which happens to be our father in this game. So we'll be taking on Norman. He's a normal type gym leader, and then following that we'll go through onto the weather building. I cannot remember the actual name of it, and then finish up with a trainer battle with May. So what I wanted to do this episode is spend just a bit of time talking about my first experiences with the Crown Tundra, and it's been out for 2 days so far. So yeah, just wanted to run through my experiences so far, what I've thought of the overall mechanics. I don't really want to get into spoiling the story for anyone if they haven't played it and they do intend to play it, because obviously it's only been out for 48 hours or so. But yeah, I wanted to touch on what I was talking about in the previous episode as well in regards to the max raid battles. So what I'll be talking about with the max raid battles isn't so much the storyline behind it, but more so how the overall mechanic works, because that's one thing that I was having a query about in regards to whether it's something that would be enjoyable or not. And to be honest, I think they've created something really cool. So what I've found is there's a mixture of different encounters. So what I view as being like the traditional encounter with Pokemon games is you get to the end game content and you come up against legendary Pokemon, and you pretty much have to battle against them and weaken them enough to be able to try to catch them. And the catch rate tends to be pretty hard, but if you get them down to barely any HP and then use something like hypnosis or like paralyze, or do something to them in terms of status affecting them, it does make it easy to catch them. So in this DLC there's a bit of both. So what you come across is you've got things like the legendary bird trio, which they were advertising fairly heavily in the previews, where you've got Zapdos, Articuno and Moltres. They're involved in the storyline. I won't really touch on how they come into it, but all I can say is that the traditional catching mechanic is there for them, which is good, because I enjoyed that style of thing, because very much like when I was going about collecting all the Pokemon for the Pokedex in Sword and Shield, I made I believe it's called a Glade. Again, my pronunciation's probably horrible. And that was a fairly helpful Pokemon, because you'd get False Swipe with it, you'd have to breed it specifically to get it, and then you'd get Hypnosis as well along with Mean Look, so then it meant you could pretty much, so just say like this Abra for example, you could stop it from running away, which is handy with some Pokemon that you come across where they do have an attempt to flee. But I've been using him to help out with catching some of the legendaries that are in the game. And then when it comes to the max raids, it's very interesting how the overall thing works. I do have my criticisms about it, but you have two options. You can either choose to go by yourself, which puts 3 NPCs in with you, quite similar to how the normal raids go in the main game, where you can either go online and have other people join you, or you can use NPCs and they just use rental Pokemon. So in this case, you're all using rental Pokemon. You do get to choose what you want to run with out of an option of 3 to begin with. And then you also, the one query that I had about the game before, or the DLC update before it came through, was how the Pokemon that you catch during the raid come into it. So pretty much you come up against multiple Pokemon leading up to the legendary. You don't get told what the legendary is. It's shrouded in a mist, so you can only see what type it is. I tried to guess it when I came up against mine, and I was always wrong, because I was like, oh, it's an ice type, it must be this, and I've forgotten how many certain ice type legendaries there are. So there's quite a lot of content there in terms of if you want to go through and get all of them. My success rate is probably about 25% at the moment, because I've gone through and tried to do it 4 times, where I've come up against 4 different legendaries, and I've only managed to get one of them because I've fallen at the final hurdle. Because it is actually, it's very strategic in terms of the ones you come up against, because you get told the status type of the one at the end, so you can kind of pick and choose as you go along in terms of trying to come across one that'll be a good status type. So I think that's a very cool mechanic. The only criticism that I have of it is, and well, it's a good thing and a bad thing. So if you catch the one you come up against, you can choose whether you want to swap it for the one that you're using at the moment. And if you choose not to, it allows it to go to one of your teammates. So in a similar way, I haven't played online, but I can pretty much guess how it works, is if you elect not to have it, then someone else can have it. And it's the same with the NPCs. I think it's good, but the one thing that I found was I would like to have a little bit more control over which NPC chooses it to be its new replacement, because some of the rentals that you get placed with, I think, I can't remember the name of the one that I came up against, but it was a really, really weak rental Pokemon for this NPC to have, and it wasn't contributing whatsoever to the battle, and I really wanted them to swap for one that we'd just taken out, so then they'd have a stronger Pokemon with them, and then they'd have full HP as well, because the thing with the mechanic as well is you have a life bar of 4 hearts, so the hearts almost look like something out of Zelda, where it's just telling you how it's going about, and it's really funny because you can really, really mess it up right at the end if you've not been smart about what you've come up against throughout the whole thing. So it's very, very strategic, and I imagine it's probably pretty fun playing with people online. I probably will give it a go, but I don't really know that many people who play Pokemon Sword and Shield as much as I do. I've got a few friends who play through the main story, but they've moved on to other games. But yeah, and I think I had a friend at work who borrowed a copy of mine just to play through the main story and then gave it back to me. But yeah, so it's something where I think it's good, but then I'd just love to be able to manage their Pokemon a little bit more, because every time I've done it, they've had someone who's had a good one swap it out for something else, and you can't choose whether they have the option to swap it out or not. The only thing that you can do to stop that from happening is for you to choose to have that Pokemon, and sometimes it's not the best idea to take it on because the one that you've got is a pretty good one. So I have fallen at the final hurdle a couple of times, but it's good in a way because you come up against, if you get to the final battle against that legendary and you lose, it tells you that you can save on that location. So essentially what it's saying is you can remember the pathway of how you came across that legendary in particular, and you can revisit it at a later time. It doesn't mean you can go straight back to battling it, but you start back at the start again and you work your way all the way through. So it would almost be a fun way of just going through and locating each one, like not intentionally losing, but just where you come up against it and you've got it listed there. So just say you just wanted to go and catch it or try and get to it, you can do that. So I think that they've really put a lot of work into it, and then the story, it's alright, but I think I'm with a lot of people where I don't really play for the main storyline of a Pokemon game. I play more so just like I love having grown up with this game where it's evolved as I've grown up, and just like the overall imagination of it, the way that they've got the whole world working where you can just, especially encountering things running around in the wild, it's just really cool. But yeah, so the story is alright. It's I'm neither here nor there on it. I don't really come to it for great story writing or anything like that. Like I do think that they have some creativity in how they set things up and all of that. But yeah, it's something where I found myself wondering whether if this was a day one launch product in terms of both DLCs being with the main game, how much would the overall criticism of the game have just decreased? Like, I know people are always going to be critical of it for having a reduced Pokédex, and that's completely understandable. But in terms of having this as like a post-game content, especially the Crown Tundra, I mean, the Isle of Armor is more of a mid-game filler content that you can do if you're not wanting to go through doing all your gym battles. But the Crown Tundra is very much, I would view that as very much being focused on endgame, especially where you're just going up against a lot of the legendaries. Like, I haven't finished the storyline as it stands, so I don't know how much of the story there is. But I can see that a lot of people would spend their time doing the max raid battles. And I certainly think that the max raids, it's something really creative, it inspires teamwork if you've got people that you like to play with, or if you just want to match with randoms. The only thing that I'm a little bit hesitant with in terms of playing with people online that I don't know is the fact that I believe only one of you can catch the legendary Pokemon at a time, so it's not like all of you, if you come up, say, so my first one was, and I know I'm probably going to butcher this name, but it was Suicune, one of the Gen 2 legendary dogs. So I thought that was pretty cool to come across that one, because in the previous episode I was referencing how like I was a big Entei fan still, and I do like Suicune as well. Again, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. But it was cool that that was my first one, and my first run was actually successful. So I managed to get through it the first time all the way, and I felt like it was fairly easy, but then I went back through again and I started to see how you can have some difficulties with it. So I'm sure after I do it for a while, I can probably learn the ins and outs and the way to traverse it properly and be able to really work out a strategic way of doing it. But at the moment, I'm doing a combination of the raid battles and then going off doing some of the storyline, and then also working on the Pokédex. So every time I see something that I know that I haven't caught before, I'll go out of my way to try and catch it. But yeah, so it's cool. I didn't spoil it for myself in terms of looking at what they were adding in this time, so I knew that they were adding in a lot of the legendaries. That was a given. But in terms of just like the regular everyday Pokemon, I didn't really look at what roster they were adding in, so it's been a bit of a surprise seeing what's there, and it's really cool, because I know that I've got an Aaron on my team in this playthrough here, and they've added him into the DLC, so I thought that was really cool that he's there for the Crown Tundra. I went out of my way to catch him and both evolutions as well. But that was a really cool thing to come across, and seeing them in the wild wandering around, I thought it was really neat. And so I've just tried to do a combination of things. It's something that I'm wanting to drag out a little bit. I don't want to blast through it all in one day and then not have anything really to do. But I think that the max raid battles will certainly take a lot of work to get through, in terms of if you wanted to get through each of them. I've caught 2 out of the 3 legendary birds from the storyline, because it's really neat in terms of what the main person that you encounter when you first get off the train to this place, because you catch the train from Wedgehurst again, and it takes you to the Crown Tundra. So you have the option of going to the Isle of Armor or the Crown Tundra, but pretty much so you eventually come across the legendary birds in one of the areas. I just came across them from wandering around, and then they go off, and I've caught 2 of those, because you have to go track them down. But I thought it was really neat the way that they do it with the storyline. Is I was wondering if I had to write down any of the clues that it was giving me, but it actually gives you something it's a very tacky drawing, but you get given hints and stuff as to what you might be coming up against, and where you've noted that they've gone, or where like people give you information. So it's almost like you're researching into the thing, and I think that's really neat. Just adds to just feeling like you're on a bit of a quest. So it was cool tracking down 2 of them. I'm working out how to get to the 3rd one, and then working out the main story behind the main legendary one, whose name is just escaping me at the moment. But you come across him a couple of times, and he's rumored as being the king of the area, or something along those lines. And overall it's positive. I say it's certainly worth, as much as it pains me to say it, it's certainly worth the $45 that it was for the DLC in Australian dollars. I don't know, like one thing that I was questioning myself on was how much will I play it for a second time around, in terms of with my Pokemon Sword DLC that I've got as well. I'm not sure if I will, because unless I come across something where there's an exact reason to do it, and I guess Isle of Armor's been out long enough where with the Isle of Armor there was a reason why you should play through it twice. I feel like I need to play through it a 3rd time almost, just so I can get my Cubfu for my living dex in my Pokemon Home. But since there were two different versions of cub food that you could evolve it into, there was a reason to play through it twice, and that's what I did. And I felt like the story, you knew what it was involving, where I knew how quickly I could get through it. As much as I hate speed running through things, I just wanted to get through it, have it, and then so I've got the two different versions of Urshifu, and then I just need to get a cub food just not to evolve, but that's fine enough. I might just play through it on my copy of Sword just to complete the DLC and not go through and do the max raids, because I would like to do them a second time around, but I think what I'd like to save that for is doing it as part of the playthrough that I plan to do on this channel eventually. So a playthrough of Pokemon Sword or Pokemon Shield where I do it from start to finish, and yeah, I'm starting to formulate like how I'd like to do that. So I might do that sooner than expected. I'm not 100% on it. I might do it once I'm done with this Emerald playthrough, and just do that. There's a few ideas that I'm tossing around in terms of how I'd like to do it, but yeah, so I might do it then, where I could see myself wanting to play through it again in terms of recording it all and having really that experience where I'm just really testing it out this time around, but then playing through it properly and treating it as like a proper end game content after playing through the main story, because I would really like to see how that would look, treating it, pretending as if it was almost a full game rather than these being two pieces of DLC, because I think it would have had really, really positive reviews if they'd had this as the complete end game product. And I know that they're getting more money out of us by doing this DLC this way, but you wonder, it's just like, if were they really that pressed for time where they couldn't come out with this as part of the game? Was it something where it was an afterthought that they had this in, or was it always planned out from when they were working on the main game to begin with, when it wasn't called Sword and Shield, where they had a secret project name for it? Was it something where, and I can relate this to what I do for work, where car companies have a launch model and then they eventually come out with, so like the car that I'm quite fond of, like the BMW 1 Series, where they launched the new version and they had two launch models, and now they're coming out with a third engine. It's just like, were they working on that one at the same time, or was it an afterthought? Were they always planning on doing it like this, where they'd bring out the DLC 6 months after and then 12 months after the original release? Is it that sort of thing? Because I think it would really be a cool game if they'd had it all in one package to go, because it almost feels like what the other games were originally. So like what you've got with Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, where they've got the wormholes at the end of the game. It's almost, that's what the max raid battles feel to me like. They're a little bit different in terms of their execution, but the concept is similar in terms of where you've got pretty much every legendary possible as something that you can come across. But yeah, this is the way that they've gone about it, and it's got to be something where, it's, if you want to play through it, I really highly recommend it. If you're against the way that they've done this and you're not that much of a fan of the games anymore, and you're more of a fan of these types of games, I'd say that's fair enough as well. You're always entitled to your opinion, but I think, it really feels like it ties off the entire game, which makes me feel like there won't be a third DLC, because I feel like this is just the the crown for it in a way, in terms of just finishing off the overall game and just having it as a finished, finalized product that I was looking at it on, because they've started selling the copies of it for the combined DLC with the game, and it's 125 Australian dollars. That's really expensive. Like, granted, that's on EB Games website, so you always add $10 or $20 onto whatever retail price. So I could probably find it $20 cheaper somewhere else, but you look at that and go, yep, alright. So at least, well, I feel like I was wondering if they were just going to sell it for the normal price in terms of the game, but then that doesn't make sense if you're still selling the DLC separately as well from on the eShop, where they're selling the game and then they're selling the DLC. But yeah, so fair game to them. They're trying to squeeze extra money out of it, so they turned a $60 game into a $125 game. by moving from a handheld console to a hybrid console, which is a interesting tactic. You know, if I really couldn't imagine them thinking, well, maybe they figured it would work because people are willing to pay, you know, whatever they have to in order to play these games. But yeah, it's certainly something interesting for them to do. But yeah, guys, in regards to this episode, as you can see, we are approaching near the end of it. So I did talk up a bit in terms of what this episode was going to involve, but this is just going to involve the battle with Norman, and then next episode will be focusing on a little bit of a side quest that I'd never done before, and I wanted to see where it led me with Watson in terms of new Morville city and the generator that he wants you to switch off, and then going on to the Weather Institute, and then going on to the battle with May. So I think I did 2 recordings at once yesterday when I was doing this, and yeah, I kind of forgot that I wanted to split this into 2. So yeah, so the battle with Norman is going fairly well. I did have to use a revive to bring Kadabra back, but yeah, look, it's my stance on revives is if you're having to constantly use them, then I think it's bad. But if you just have to use it once in order to bring something back, like, you know, he's using a hyper potion right back there after all the work that I did, so it's pretty much made it null and void in terms of what I've already attempted. So yeah, I don't think revives are that much of a cheating mechanic. I know that the NPCs don't use them, but yeah, it's something that's made available to you. It's not something where you're, you know, hacking them into the game or anything like that. And I think in some situations they can just come in handy where you might have just been unlucky with what's happened here. And yeah, the AI is a bit strange in terms of its choices of moves, especially given that he's loafing around every second move. So yeah, so we're going fairly well through this game at the moment. I was hoping that I wasn't going to have to do a lot of grinding before coming up against Norman, and I actually enjoyed going through taking on all of his minions that are in the building as well. It's cool the way that those rooms are set up in terms of it pretty much warns you what you're going to be coming up against every time. But yeah, I'm just wearing down his accuracy here a bit so that his attacks aren't as well, just hoping that they'll miss. And yeah, just bringing back Kadabra here once more, just doing a 1-2 combination between Marshtomp and Kadabra, because obviously the Psychic type does fairly well here, but they're a bit squishy when it comes to getting hit with counter and other sorts of attacks. Just yeah, but yeah, cool. We're getting misses here as well. But yeah, so I'll start to play through the Crown Tundra a little bit more. So it's yeah, it's something I just want to savor a bit, and then I'm sure that the max raids will take a while for me to to get through. But yeah, it's a cool game, but again, like what I was touching on just with the third DLC, I can't see how they can really add something else onto it, just where it really feels like it's the finale for this version, and then I'm sure that they'll announce fairly soon what they're planning to do next now that they've got this out of the way, be it whether it's like a collection of older games for the Switch, just so that people have got access to it rather than having to have a 3DS, you know, whether they choose to do something like that, or if it's the remakes for Gen 4, or if it's Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Marill, or anything like that for the next versions of Let's Go. So yeah, I'm sure that they're still an age away from actually coming out with it, but I know that they like to hint towards like what the next plans are, because I'm sure people are content with playing through the Crown Tundra now, but then they'll always want to know what's next following it, so you can't really stay on one thing for too long. You've got to keep pushing forwards, and if they're anything like any other company, they've probably got other things in the works already that they'll just come out with. Obviously, they've got new Pokemon Snap coming too, which will be cool to play through because I played through the first one a little bit, but I didn't really do too much of it. It wasn't a game that I ever actually owned as a console game. It's a bit weird that this guy just sort of just like drags you away straight away from like I know he's someone who we know, but it's weird that he just kind of drags you away from like a father-son moment there of like bonding over the fact that he just lost you and how much you're growing up. But it's cool to get Surf anyway. But yeah, it's kind of weird that he doesn't really come back after you. Like I can literally just leave here and do whatever. But yeah, so that's it for this episode, guys. Next time, as I was saying, we'll go off to the Weather Institute, if that's the actual name of it. But firstly, with a pit stop to the generator, and then we'll run into May after all of that. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.